There is a crime that strikes at the very heart of home and family, a crime hidden behind closed doors, where love and fear become dangerously entangled. It is a crime where victims often feel too ashamed, too terrified, or too dependent to press charges. That crime is domestic abuse. For more than a year, Thames Valley Police opened their doors to allow cameras to follow their work. What emerged were not statistics, but the raw, human stories of women who had endured violence from those closest to them, and the police officers determined to protect them. This is not just a story of crime and punishment. It is a story of survival, courage, and the difficult road to justice. The women you are about to meet are not defined by their suffering, but by their strength. Their names have been changed to protect them, but their voices are real. They speak not only for themselves, but for thousands of others living in silence. Rachel's story. Rachel once believed she had found lasting love. At first, her partner was attentive and affectionate, but over time, his behavior shifted. What began as jealous questions turned into controlling demands. Eventually, the verbal attacks gave way to violence. Rachel recalls the night everything changed. I can still feel his hand around my throat. I thought he was going to kill me. I remember gasping for breath, wondering if I would ever see my children again. It was not the first time she had been hurt, but it was the first time she called the police. Officers arrived quickly, separating Rachel from her abuser, capturing the chaotic aftermath on their body-worn cameras. For Rachel, that call marked the start of a painful but necessary journey out of fear. Claire's story. Claire describes her relationship as a trap that tightened slowly over the years. Her partner's charm masked a controlling nature that grew darker with time. By the time the violence began, she felt too isolated to leave. He used to tell me nobody would believe me, she recalls. That if I tried to leave, I'd lose everything, my home, my kids, my dignity. After a while, I started to believe him. One night, an argument escalated until her partner pinned her against the wall, his hand pressing against her throat. In that terrifying moment, Claire realized she might not survive if she stayed. Gathering what courage she had left, she called 999. The officers who arrived found a woman on the edge, frightened, exhausted, but still clinging to hope that things could change. Sarah's story. For Sarah, the abuse was woven into daily life so seamlessly that at times she barely recognized it as abuse. Her partner's control was constant, dictating where she went, who she spoke to, even how she dressed. When she resisted, punishment came swiftly. One night, the shouting turned to physical assault in front of their young daughter. Sarah recalls the fear in her child's eyes. That was the moment I knew I had to do something. It wasn't just about me anymore. She deserved better than to grow up thinking this was normal. Sarah called the police, her voice shaking as she described what had happened. Officers documented her injuries, photographed the damage in the house, and began building a case. But Sarah, like so many others, faced an agonizing decision, whether to press charges and risk retaliation or to withdraw and try to endure in silence. Domestic abuse cases are unlike any other. They happen in the most private of places, often without witnesses, leaving victims torn between fear and loyalty. The cycle of violence is sustained not just by physical control, but by psychological manipulation that convinces victims they cannot escape. For the police, each call is more than a response to a crime. It is a chance to break that cycle, to step between victim and abuser, and to offer a way forward. But the path from that first phone call to a courtroom conviction is long, difficult, and fraught with obstacles. For police officers, domestic abuse is unlike any other crime. They are not responding to strangers in conflict, but to people bound by love, history, and family. When they arrive at a home, they step into a place where violence and intimacy coexist. It is a fragile environment, and every decision must be made with care. The first priority is always safety. Suspects are removed from the scene, victims are separated, and children are shielded from the chaos. Only then can the delicate work of gathering evidence begin. Photographs of bruises are taken, property damage is documented, and statements are carefully recorded. But officers know that victims often change their minds. In the quiet after an arrest, fear and doubt creep back in. Many victims decide they no longer want to press charges, believing it is safer to return to silence than to risk the consequences of speaking out. Detectives are painfully familiar with this pattern. It is not unusual for someone to give us a full statement at 2 in the morning, then call us the next day to say they've made it all up. One officer explains, "That's why we gather as much independent evidence as possible. We can rely solely on a victim's word when their safety is on the line." Body-worn cameras have transformed this process. They capture the raw truth, the fear in a victim's voice, the disarray of a broken home, the anger of an abuser denying everything. These recordings are powerful in court, allowing juries to see what officers saw in the moment. They cut through doubts and defenses, showing the reality of abuse in ways words alone cannot. In Rachel's case, the footage showed her partner shouting aggressively as police arrived, while Rachel's face bore the unmistakable signs of fear. Later, when she hesitated to testify, that video became vital evidence. For Sarah, photographs revealed bruises running up her arms. A neighbor's statement described hearing terrified screams through the walls, and her daughter's quiet words, recorded by specialists, exposed a pattern of violence that had long remained hidden. Evidence alone, however, cannot erase the complexity of these cases. Defense lawyers argue that victims are exaggerating, that police are criminalizing arguments, or that the accused is being punished for a simple mistake. Without a survivor willing to stand in court, even the strongest evidence can feel incomplete. That is where support services step in. Independent domestic violence advisors, known as IDVA letters, guide survivors through the justice process. They explain legal procedures, prepare victims for the ordeal of testimony, and act as a steady presence in moments of doubt. For many survivors, the IDVA is the first person they truly trust after years of manipulation. Claire remembers her first meeting with her advisor. She didn't tell me what to do. She just listened. For the first time, I felt believed. That simple act of recognition gave her strength to continue. But even with support, fear lingers. Survivors worry about retaliation, about losing their homes or children, about being judged by friends and family. These fears often push them back towards silence. Officers see it happen again and again, the same addresses, the same suspects, the same cycle repeating. Each time, the violence escalates, becoming more dangerous. One of the clearest warning signs is strangulation. Research shows that victims who have been strangled are at much greater risk of being killed by their partners in the future. Police treat such assaults as urgent red flags. Claire knows this reality all too well. The night her partner's hand closed around her throat, she realized she might not survive the next time. That was the moment I knew I had to go through with it, she recalls. If I didn't, I might not live to regret it. The impact of abuse extends far beyond physical injuries. Survivors describe anxiety, nightmares, and constant hypervigilance. Everyday sounds, a slammed door, footsteps in the hallway can trigger memories of terror. Children who grow up in such homes carry invisible scars into adulthood, struggling with trust and relationships. By intervening, police are not only protecting a victim, but potentially breaking a cycle that can span generations. Detectives spend countless hours piecing together case files, statements, photographs, call logs, and medical reports. Each fragment adds weight, but together they must form a story convincing enough for a jury to understand. Their task is to turn chaos and pain into evidence and testimony. For Rachel, the evidence revealed not a single night of violence, but a long pattern of coercion and control. Friends spoke about her withdrawing from social life, colleagues recalled her covering bruises, and neighbors admitted to hearing arguments through the walls. It was a mosaic of moments that, when seen together, told the truth. But telling the truth is not the same as finding justice. The next step, court, is often the most daunting of all. Survivors must face not only the system, but the very person who hurt them, in a room filled with strangers. Once the police investigation is complete, the case passes into the hands of prosecutors. Their task is to decide whether the evidence is strong enough to stand in court. For survivors, this moment brings both hope and dread. It signals progress toward justice, but it also means preparing to relive their trauma in public. For Rachel, the wait for trial was agonizing. Weeks stretched into months, each day heavy with anxiety. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept imagining what it would be like to sit in that court room, to see him again. It felt like I was right back there in the house, waiting for him to explode. The courtroom is meant to symbolize fairness and justice, yet for survivors of abuse, it can feel more like a battlefield. The formality of the proceedings, the black robes, the elevated judge, the solemn language can make their personal suffering seem cold and abstract. And when the accused enters, often smartly dressed and calm, the contrast with the violence described in testimony can be unsettling. Claire remembers the shock of seeing her partner in the dock. He looked so confident, so relaxed. For a second I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd imagined it all. That's what he always told me, that I was crazy. that I was making it up. But then I remembered the bruises, the fear in my kids' eyes, the nights I thought I might not survive. That's what carried me through, to lessen the trauma. Courts offer special measures. Survivors can testify from behind a screen or appear by video link from another room. These protections help, but they cannot remove the weight of testifying. Survivors know their words will be dissected, doubted, and challenged. Defense lawyers probe relentlessly. They highlight moments when survivors stayed in the relationship, when they reconciled, or when they minimized the abuse. They question memory, motive, and credibility. Each question feels like an accusation. Sarah recalls the sting of being asked why she didn't leave sooner. They made it sound like I chose to stay, like I wanted it. They didn't understand how fear works. When you're threatened, when you've got a child to protect, when you don't even believe you deserve better, leaving isn't simple. But in court, you can't explain all that. You just answer the questions and hope they believe you. Prosecutors counter with evidence. They play the 999 recordings, show photographs of injuries. At present body cam footage, they call neighbors, doctors, and police officers as witnesses. Piece by piece, they construct a narrative that shows abuse as more than just arguments. It is a pattern of control and violence. Still, outcomes are uncertain. Juries may hesitate without clear testimony. They may sympathize with defendants who appear respectable. Even strong evidence can falter under doubt. Rachel's case ended in a conviction. She remembers the moment the verdict was read. It was like I could finally breathe again. It didn't erase what happened, but it gave me a chance to start over. Claire's case ended differently. The jury could not agree on a verdict, and the trial collapsed. She describes the moment as crushing. I felt like I'd gone through all that pain for nothing. He walked out smiling, and I walked out feeling smaller than ever. Yet she refuses to see it as defeat. I'm still here. That's what matters. That's my victory. Sarah's case ended in a plea bargain. Faced with overwhelming evidence, her partner admitted to some charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. It wasn't the full acknowledgement she wanted, but it spared her the ordeal of testifying. I wanted him to hear every word, but I don't think I could have gone through it. When they told me he pleaded guilty, I felt relieved more than anything. Trials do more than expose abuse. They test the endurance of survivors. They demand composure in the face of doubt, clarity in the face of trauma, and strength in the face of intimidation. Yet simply standing in court is itself an act of courage. Speaking the truth aloud, under oath, reclaims power from the abuser. For police and prosecutors, every conviction is a triumph, but every collapsed case is a painful reminder of the system's limits. Still, they return to their work, driven by the belief that even one life saved makes the struggle worthwhile. And for the survivors, the verdict, whatever it may be, is only one part of their journey. The real challenge begins after the trial, when they must rebuild their lives, find safety, and begin the long process of healing. For survivors, the end of a trial is not the end of their story. The courtroom may close, the sentence may be handed down, but the echoes of abuse do not fade overnight. Healing is not measured in weeks or months. It is a process that stretches across years, carried forward one small step at a time. Rachel remembers walking out of court after the conviction. The weight of fear had lifted, but what remained was exhaustion. I thought I'd feel free straight away, but really, I just felt empty. I'd spent so long surviving. I didn't know how to live anymore. For Claire, whose case ended without a conviction, the aftermath was different. Her abuser's acquittal left her fearful that he might return, watching her every move. Yet she refused to surrender to that fear. He took so much from me already. I wasn't going to let him take the rest of my life. She threw herself into rebuilding, seeking therapy, finding new routines, and slowly reclaiming her independence. Sarah found her strength in her daughter. After the trial, she worked to create a safe home where laughter could replace shouting, where love was not tangled with violence. Every time she smiles now, I know I made the right choice. I broke the cycle for her. That's what keeps me going. The long road of recovery. Support services play a crucial role in this journey. Counselors, advocacy workers, and survivor networks provide not just practical help, but the reassurance that survivors are not alone. Healing is not just about moving past violence. It is about rebuilding trust, rediscovering self-worth, and learning that love should never come with fear. Yet resources are often stretched thin. Demand for refuge spaces outstrips supply. Survivors may face long waiting lists for counseling, or struggle with the financial burdens of starting over. For many, the road ahead remains precarious still. Every survivor who speaks out helps break the silence that allows abuse to thrive. Every police officer who listens with compassion, every prosecutor who fights for justice, every juror who believes the truth, they are all part of dismantling the culture of secrecy. A hidden epidemic domestic abuse is not confined to any one community, class, or culture. It thrives in silence and denial, often hidden behind the facade of ordinary life. Statistics may help reveal the scale of the problem, but they cannot capture the fear in a child's eyes or the courage in a survivor's voice. The reality is stark for many women and men too. Home is not a place of safety, but the most dangerous place of all. Behind closed doors, countless victims endure threats, humiliation, and violence, often in silence. But silence is exactly what abusers rely on. By telling these stories, by shining a light into the shadows, that silence begins to break. Closing narration, this film has followed 3 women through some of the darkest moments of their lives. Each story is different, yet all are bound by a common thread: the courage to speak, the resilience to survive, and the determination to reclaim a life stolen by violence. Domestic abuse is not just a private matter, it is a crime. And while police and courts can play their part, true change requires something deeper: a society willing to listen, to believe, and to act. Rachel, Claire, and Sarah remind us that behind every statistic is a human being, someone who once believed they were alone, but who found the strength to fight back. Their voices speak for thousands still waiting to be heard. And so, as the doors of this documentary close, one truth remains clear: silence protects the abuser, voices protect the survivor. This is not just their story, it is a call to all of us to recognize, to respond, and to refuse to look away.